Hi, everyone. Nate here. Just a quick heads up that if you enjoy What a Hell of a Way to Die, you can access bonus content in which we publish a new episode every week on our Patreon. The link is in the show notes, and for $5 a month, you get access to all the bonus content we've put out since we started the show back in 2016. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is Francis. It is Nate. Nate, it's been a while since you and I had a talk. My garden has been winterized. I pulled out all my tomato plants. I ran them over with my lawnmower to mulch them. Put the tomato mulch into my into the bed, and gonna plant garlic. I think this year. That's the plan. We're gonna overwinter with garlic and see how that does.
It's funny because there's been times when, despite how proud I am of what I was able to accomplish with my basil, or when I bought the live herbs from the grocery store and planted them and they all survived and like really thrived, or like it got really hot in August and I just germinated some coriander seeds or cilantro seeds in the ground, just like no real prep, and they've done really well. But I can definitely tell that, like, okay, it was an early attempt. It's the first time I've really done serious gardening since my mom let me grow radishes when I was 6. But I also get jealous because, like, a friend of mine just happened to plant one old potato that she wasn't going to use from the grocery store and got like a full-on crop of summer potatoes. And I was just like, oh, I got to do more. I got to be more aggressive. But every time I look outside in my garden, I just see like more of like a jungle of weeds and shit. But that being said, my peppers have flowered significantly. They're doing pretty well in the tent. I think the temperature is the increase in there is keeping them thriving even when it's starting to get into like the low 50s, high 40s at night. It doesn't really get below freezing here that often, and when it does, it's like midwinter. So I think we're okay for the time being. But like as I said before, I don't even mind doing all that work if I can just get one good hot pepper from the whole crop. Considering that I germinated seeds from peppers that I bought from the grocery store, like I'll be over the moon. But I do see some of the earliest flowers got pollinated, and like they're starting to form peppers. How well they will perform, I don't know. But one of the two that's doing really well, when you look at the stems that are forming on like where the flower used to be, they're fucking gigantic. So it makes me wonder if I'm going to get like mango-sized peppers. And those plants also have only been fertilized with leachate from my hot composter. So if that's like the full-on organic gardening experience, then hell yeah, because like I obviously want to be rewarded with huge hot peppers, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I topped off my my compost bin, like was filled after I pulled all the tomatoes out. And if anybody's wondering why I did the tomato mulch, it's because when you grow tomatoes in a bed, it like sucks all the phosphorus out. That's why you shouldn't grow tomatoes in the same place every year. Like you have to rotate your tomatoes around because it just does so much damage to the soil. But if you mulch it and compost the tomato plants back into the soil, it really helps out. So that's kind of this year we're planning on getting more keyhole gardens, which are great because like they're raised beds, but they're like up to your thigh height, so they suck to fill. But also, like, you know, you throw like logs and stuff in there, like it's a whole ecosystem that you're building inside of this keyhole garden, and then it has a composter in the middle of it. So you just dump compost in there, and it leaches out into the soil, and it's just kind of a self-healing raised bed. So
That kind of sounds like a garden you would have on like a spacecraft going to Mars.
It really is. Like the keyhole is what you would want. They're expensive. Well, they're expensive. You get them from Costco. We're gonna get a 4x4. And the 4x4 is I think like $100-something, but it's made of that like really good polymer plastic, so it's not gonna like fall apart after a couple days. Like it's not wood, so it's not gonna rot. Like if you built a keyhole garden with bricks and stones or like really good rot resistant wood, it's still gonna cost you a lot of money. So it's an investment one way or the other. But like I said, it's great because once you get it filled, and I can fill it with compost, logs. You throw logs in there. There's this German form of gardening and farming called it's a long German word, but it's higiculture or hugiculture. Basically, what you do is you dig a trench and then you throw all kinds of compost. You throw logs in there. You throw all kinds of shit into the trench, and then if you dug 2 feet down and then filled the trench with all the way up, and then put all that dirt back on top of it, you create a mound. So everything that's in the mound starts to decay and break down and leach into the soil. So it's like it's basically a big mound garden that you don't have to fertilize for 5 to 10 years because it's just constantly breaking down and adding stuff back to the soil. So that's the idea of the keyhole garden. You do that because, like I said, it's a good 2 feet tall, 2.5 feet tall maybe, and once you have it filled in, you have to keep adding stuff because obviously stuff breaks down and it sinks and everything. But you can just throw shit. Here we get free city compost, which is just all the leaves they suck up every year. They just turn it out and turn it all into compost over the winter, and then just fucking come get it, free dirt, free compost. So looking forward to really expanding the Victory Garden as everything slowly falls apart and. Lord knows. I don't think Proud Boys are coming after my tomatoes though. Hopefully, because we had some good tomatoes this year.
Let's hope, right? Yeah, I have no idea what's going on in America. What's happening in Britain doesn't really warrant mention. It's just stupid. The British Prime Minister and the Home Secretary, who is a full-on Modi fascist, hired the extremely racist and sexist and homophobic former Australian Prime Minister Tony Abbott, and then he decided apparently to give them a consultation on how to build an offshore refugee island. They're talking about potentially building camps on either Ascension Island in the middle of the Atlantic or St. Helena, which is where Napoleon was sequestered in the 19th century, in the South Pacific, or South Atlantic. So we're just really, and of course, British liberals are just oh, but that would be too expensive. And it's just you guys do realize what you're saying is that you're mad at the logistics and cost of the prisoner detention island, not the concept.
Well, Racism Island is good and well, but we all live here, so we need second Racism Island.
Yeah, exactly. You can't live, the people we're racist against can't live on the island where we're racist. So yeah, I mean the idea that one of the options was the island that after Waterloo that they fucking imprisoned Napoleon on. It's just if British boomers could get boners anymore, it would just give them one permanently. So I don't want to talk about Britain. Fuck Britain. Cynthia and I had a long walk the other day on my birthday, and we're just you know what? We love South London. South London is home now, but fuck this country. But South London rules. That's the way that I feel. Don't really need to expound on that. So
I feel that I love my neck of the woods, but this country can go sink into the ocean.
Yes,
and just keep South City up, and I'll be fine.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel. And so you know what? I don't want to talk about politics. I don't want to talk about the stupid debate. I didn't watch the fucking debate. I'm thinking about Plies, the rapper Plies, on Instagram 4 years ago when he was I don't watch no motherfucking debate. That's 100% how I felt. I don't care. I don't give a shit. I don't want 2 old ass men to melt down and fucking blast their diapers in front of me. I don't care. However,
what we do want to talk about.
Yeah, exactly.
What we do want to talk about is the Kandahar Giant.
We want to talk about military crypto-zoology.
Goddamn. And as soon as I posted about it, and if you got more crypto-zoology, somebody sent me something about the Yetis of Vietnam, the rock Yetis of Vietnam. Well, obviously we're going to be doing a lot of stuff here. The Kandahar Giant, sent to us by a friend of the show, is about this 11 to 12 foot giant that was just kind of living in a cave in Afghanistan. I'm going to read to you from a website called thexplan.net.
This is some really, really amazing writing. I believe it was originally written in Italian and then translated onto this website. It is so unbelievably well written in an extremely, putting that in scare quotes, way. So,
It's so
let's
long.
just go.
There's so much to
We
it.
will
Like, I was
not
like,
get through this. We will not
we'll
get
do a
through all
reading
this.
series. It's like, fuck no, we won't. This is because it goes into like, the historical accuracy of a Kandahar giant. Like, so we'll link this. Definitely read this. It's insane and also beautiful at the same time. But what you, dear listener, want are the nitty gritty details. So the witness, Stephen Quayle, spoke of the occurrence, still classified by the U.S. government, on his popular radio show Coast to Coast. Now, this is not Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie necessarily, but George Norrie is, he did apparently have some of the people that witnessed this on his show, but this is somebody else. The events allegedly happened in 2002 on a desert part of Afghanistan, when a U.S. Army squad went missing. A special ops task force was sent out to find what happened, and the soldiers walked along a ragged, mountainous trail until arriving at the entrance of a large cave. Pieces of broken U.S. military equipment and gear were scattered all around the clearing. The task force was about to enter the cave and explore its recesses when a 13-foot, red-headed, 6-digit, double-toothed humanoid emerged and attacked them. So basically they were attacked by your very pixelated picture, Nate, that the Fash keep using.
Yes,
it keeps
100%.
getting more and more pixelated.
Bigger and hairier and smelling worse, just like me. According to the witnesses, the giant pierced one of the soldiers with his long spear, killing him before the rest of the squad could take him down, shooting his face for 30 seconds straight. The body of the giant was packed and loaded into a helicopter and transferred to a secret location in the USA for study. Based on Quayle's story, L.A. Marzulli succeeded in identifying and interviewing one of the members of the task force who actually saw and shot the Giant of Kandahar as this event came to be known. The soldier said that his squad, on searching the cave, had come upon a gigantic humanoid with a thick red beard and long hair of the same color. Inside the cave, there were remains of human bones, leading the military to think the creature was a cannibal. One of the soldiers was impaled by the weapon the giant wielded, a kind of long spear or lance, during the 30-second shootout. It took that long to kill the creature. According to the witness, the U.S. government didn't disclose the event and has no intention to do so in the future because, quote, giants don't match the way we explain our world, unquote.
I like the idea that the U.S. government refuses to release information based on no, that's just not what we say. Giants don't exist because that's just that's not how we like to present the world to people. Because this would be cool as shit if there were obviously giants living around. But also, here's my plan at this point, Nate. I know I'm announcing it here, but I'm gonna start stealing giant valor. I'm gonna become the McHuya of giants. I'm just gonna get drunk on airplanes and claim that I killed the Kandahar giant. It was me. It was me the entire time, Nate. 2002, Afghanistan. I was 20 years old, special ops, going after, finding a squad of soldiers that have gone missing. My best friend lanced through the chest by a giant spear, and I killed him myself by shooting him in the face for 30 seconds straight. That's it.
Well,
that's my story.
Here's the thing. We got to continue because we got to keep talking about this because the thing about it is people genuinely do believe that there was a giant, a biblical giant living in southern Afghanistan, and the U.S. Army Special Forces did battle with him. So, the narrative continues. The giant weighed about 500 kilograms, as estimated by the C-130 cargo plane team who transported the body from the pickup location to the United States. The witness remembers that one of the pilots noted a, quote, terrible stench of musk and dirt, unquote, exuding from the cadaver, like a man, quote, who didn't shower for 10 years, unquote. Once again, stop talking about me. The witness
that's any American soldier. Maybe they just found a really tall troop.
Yeah, they found one of my privates who literally had to get Boyle's lance when we were in the field because he was so dirty. The witness told Marzulli that the odor was more intense than that of a skunk and close to that of a pile of decomposing corpses. The giant wore a canvas or animal hide to protect his feet, like some sort of moccasins. We searched online and retrieved the original interview. The witness talks details about the encounter with this huge being, which had occurred in a remote area near Kandahar, Afghanistan. Marzulli calls the witness the shooter due to his active involvement in the giant's killing and claims to have interviewed him 3 times on the phone at different times to check for any discrepancies in his story. Having found none, eventually he was convinced that the event was real and decided to meet the military in person. This is, I think, badly translated, but the soldier in person. The meeting occurred in an undisclosed location, of course. Coincidentally, On one of his trips to meet with the shooter, Marzulli found out his driver was a former military service member who had served in Afghanistan a few years after the event he was investigating, and that he knew about it. This new witness, codenamed Mr. D, people always call me this, was interviewed by Marzulli in the documentary series Watchers X and said, quote, "When we came back to the base, we would hear our colleagues talk about a unit that had found and killed a person inside or at the entrance of a cave. At first, I didn't think much of it, but I've heard that fellow's size was 3 times that of a human being, that he had more fingers and toes than a normal man, and that he had red hair, and that a special unit was looking for him."
A special unit.
Well, as the documentary rolls on, Marzulli shows an iron tip weighing about 6 kilograms, which, if attached to a pole to make a spear, would be difficult to maneuver for a middle-sized man. That tip was found in Michigan and given to an Indian chief of a reservation, but is the same object that the shooter claims to have seen in the hands of the Giant of Kandahar during the attack. The same iron tip that killed his colleague. Now, I don't know if this is a translation issue or if they're basically saying that this was a large hunk of iron that Native Americans had found and that it was similar, or if it's the exact same one.
I think they're trying to get to, hey, look, maybe there are giants all over the place because of this giant spearhead. Which, like, I mean, I understand what they're getting at. Like, you see a giant arrowhead, right? Like, if you found an arrowhead the size of your leg, it would be easy to be like, well, obviously a giant could do this. But like, if anybody ever dug up the Air Force anime sword and was like, oh, must be the insane thing that they went to war with, was these anime swords, that's incorrect. It's just ceremonial. The Air Force just has an anime sword, which I will use, which I will bring up at any point that I can. So, it's easy to do the Ancient Aliens thing, right? Where you're just like, oh, how do they move these stones? Well, I can't figure it out because I'm, a white man in 2020. It must have been aliens or something. When they could have had some like wild technology back then. Like, it wasn't until like 10 years ago that they figured out how they moved all the stones in Egypt. And it turned out that like the Egyptians wrote it down. They're like, yeah, we poured water in the sand. See that picture of the guy pouring water in the sand? It makes it really easy to pull the giant blocks across the sand. So that's what we did. So that's kind of what we have going on here. We have we have people with wild imaginations, and those wild imaginations don't lock into reality of like, well, I mean, look, maybe somebody just made a giant arrowhead for shits and giggles, because what the fuck else were you doing back then? You didn't have Netflix. You didn't, smoke a little weed and make a giant arrowhead and show your buddy and be like, oh, look, I bet a fucking really tall Native American could kill somebody with this, her, well, and then you move on with your life.
If this article was written by Italians, thereby Europeans, who have this bizarre fascination with Native Americans, that's anyone who's spent time in Europe will have experienced this if they've spoken to, as an American, if you've spoken to people, particularly Germans, but I mean, lots of Europeans are like this. And so in a way, I feel like to the European perspective, by implying that Native Americans, have some ancient object that they've found, and that is proof of a race of giants having previously walked the earth, that mental association will be made in the reader's mind that like, well, if they had it, then clearly this must be the same thing. And that, just as, they were more in touch with the true ways of the world. I mean, well, don't get me wrong. That's not to disparage Native Americans, because for fuck's sake, they certainly were more in touch with the true ways of the world when it came to ecology and not fucking murdering everyone. That being said, like, this to me just seems like a kind of like exoticization to sort of imply like, oh, well, clearly it must be the same kind of spear because clearly it was the same giant, because clearly all knowledge is finite and has been discovered and has to be rediscovered. That's definitely not fascist.
Well, and I want to. I don't know how deep into the article really we're going to go, but historically, this is based in the Bible, the Nephilim, which were like the race of giants, like after during that whole like Genesis kind of time when things
if
were
I
still
were to read this with my not super great Hebrew, I would probably say I think it would be pronounced Nephilim. And Nephilim, better. And so basically, there is an argument here that this is, a biblical giant. There's also some fucking sweet ass fan art of the giant.
I was gonna say, I don't know if you would scroll down to the pop out, like this drawing of a cave and soldiers pointing guns at the cave, and then boom, there's a giant who looks like but he's got like a 300 like shield, or See, this artist rendition makes me think he's Greek now and not some sort of biblical era. Like, how did this giant get up to like the Bronze Age and then decide, fuck it, I'm done?
Well, yeah, because in the description they were saying that he was only wearing moccasins, but in this one he's carrying a spear and shield and clothes, dressed like some sort of like David and Goliath kind of shit. And they even at the end of the article have a David and Goliath illustration in which Goliath is enormous and laughing and holding his spear. And, David looks to be about 13. So in the grand scheme of things, yeah, I see they're kind of like trying to pull upon biblical imagery. But I think the thing that makes me laugh is that, recently there was an article that I read about how American troops in Uzbekistan were exposed to carcinogens at a great rate because of the base at K2 or Karshi Khanabad. Which had previously been a Soviet and then later Uzbek military chemical weapons decon site. And so after 9/11, when we built staging areas to bring people to Afghanistan, we later focused on the base in Manas in Kyrgyzstan, but from 01 to 05, a lot of people who came to Afghanistan transited through Karshi Khanabad or through Kuwait. And they knew that this site was polluted. They knew that it was really dangerous. It had been covered with sort of like decontamination stuff. Like I don't know the technicalities of it, and I wouldn't want to guess, but stuff that they thought would mitigate it. But the problem was it was so incredibly rainy and muddy, and none of it was paved, that all of the foot traffic and vehicle traffic just churned up all this mud, and then the wind, when it was dry, blew dust everywhere. And so lots and lots of fucking people who spent time at K2 are now coming down with fatal cancer. Now, the thing about it is that when they did this story about K2, they had footage from troops who'd been there. And, this is like old BDU Black Army Fleece, high and tight 2001 military shit, but people still had digital cameras, and they still had digital cameras that filmed video. They were relatively primitive, but they existed, and people brought them. So to me, the idea that this happened, but only two people, one person saw it, and one person heard about it.
Yeah. You've got one guy who's just like, oh, I helped kill this giant, and a documentary filmmaker who's just like talks to his Uber driver and is just like, yeah, I'm interviewing this guy who says he shot a giant. And he's just like, I know that giant. Of course, this is insane. This is like in Star Trek, the movie, when you crash land on the ice planet and you just happen to be right next to Spock. It's a little too coincidental, but that's fine because it's crypto-zoology. It doesn't have to be an exact science.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, I guess the point that I would make is that here's the thing, right? A special unit found him, right? But clearly, if he was 3 times the size of a normal man, they wouldn't have had a body bag big enough to obscure the fact that it was a biblical giant, even if they wanted to. And he said, if you recall the details, he said it was airlifted by helicopter, which, 500 kilograms, like 1,100 pounds, thereabouts. Yeah, you could sling load that shit on a fucking UH-1 if you needed to. You could definitely throw that in the cargo hold of a CH-47 if you needed, or CH-53 if you needed to, or you could sling load it. But the point I'm making is that, like, the helicopter crew would have seen a big red-headed biblical giant. The folks at the fucking airfield where they downloaded it would have seen a big red-headed biblical giant. The air crew doing the manifest on the C-130 to fly it from Afghanistan back to America, which I don't think you can do direct. You're going to have to do stopovers. It's going to have to be like, what are we hauling? Oh, we're hauling the body of an 1,100-pound red-headed biblical giant. Well, when they got to America.
Excuse me, George Norrie does talk to one of the C-130 pilots, so we can get to that.
Yeah, but I mean, you see what I'm saying, though, is that they couldn't keep it secret that people had taken pictures of planes full of American flag caskets flying back from Iraq, and that was stuff where, like, there was already sort of an incentive to not share that shit because of sort of decorum reasons as opposed to conspiracy theory reasons. So, like, even if they said this is the most sacred thing, you're not allowed to take pictures that represent, visually the amount of war dead that we're experiencing on like a daily, weekly basis in Iraq. What makes you think that no one would have taken pictures of the body of a 1,100-pound red-headed biblical giant that people had shot in the face for 30 minutes?
Right. This
Or 30
isn't. This
seconds,
isn't.
whatever. 30 minutes is funnier, but 30 seconds.
Yeah, just dudes having to swap out.
Just jumping,
shoot a
just
guy in
doing
the face.
barrel changes over and over again. They're just fucking blasting this goddamn giant.
Yeah, this isn't when they killed Bin Laden and just dumped him into the ocean. Yeah, if they're gonna study this, somebody else is gonna see. Like I said, George Norrie from Coast to Coast AM supposedly talked to one of the C-130 pilots, and they caught a glimpse of what they were transporting. Like, yeah, I don't think that they got a body bag, but you stitch enough whoobies together, I'm sure you can cover up a 15-foot biblical giant. But also at the same time, yeah, you're right. Like somebody, like these were special forces. I know they're not SEALs, but somebody would have written a fucking book about it by now. Like at least 5 of the people involved would have written a book about it. We've got 3 books written about the Bin Laden raid, so I would think that a biblical giant would generate a little bit more. And this is where like all of these crypto-zoology things fall apart for me, because soldiers love to tell stories about the fucked up stuff that happened, even if the fucked up stuff that happened is beating off in a porta-john in 130-degree heat at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like soldiers will just talk about whatever, because that's because nobody else has these experiences. Like nobody else goes through these things. So shooting a giant in the face for 30 seconds is definitely something that like more people would talk to, and not necessarily to conspiracy-laden Coast to Coast AM or Italian documentary filmmakers who do giant write-ups about it. There's going to be something. So it's sad. It's sad that in the long run we have to say that the Giant of Kandahar probably didn't exist, but also the military had to come out and say they don't deny it, because the military doesn't ever deny anything unless it can deny it. The military just says it doesn't have any records of soldiers coming across the giant in Kandahar, which people love to latch onto that stuff for conspiracy theories. But the thing is that like the government is just like, nobody wrote it down, so maybe it happened. Hopefully somebody, if it did happen.
I'm personally in love with the idea that the Department of Defense public affairs people had to respond in earnest to an inquiry as to whether or not American Special Forces troops were killed by a biblical giant who weighs 1,100 pounds and is 13 feet tall in Afghanistan in 2002.
And this is why, and me working in public affairs, let me tell you something, because that is not just a flippant, like where a reporter, or you get that media inquiry and you're just like, no, you have to do legwork on that, no matter what the inquiry is. Now, when I did press releases in Afghanistan, it was mostly about weapons caches found or things getting blown up. We didn't really have much of a body count happening in Afghanistan in 2004, so it wasn't a whole lot of like war dead, but it was finding a lot of like old Soviet weapons caches, and here's catalog lists of everything, and then you release it. But like if this happened, I would have to be like, okay, well, what region did it happen to? I got to go talk to the officer in charge of that region. Hey, sir, do you have anything about this thing? And when he, looks at me and asks me if I'm fucking insane, I'll have to say, sir, this is a media inquiry. I need you to dig into it and see what happened. And they'll dig into it, and they'll come back to me and they'll say there's no reports. And then I will put in my report, I will put in my press release, there are no reports of this happening. I can't say that it didn't happen. I'm just saying that there's no reports of it happening. Because maybe it did. Maybe it did happen. Maybe a soldier is lying somewhere in Arlington National Cemetery with a spear hole in his chest. I don't know. I can't tell you that for certain. What I can tell you is there's no reports of it happening. Other than this now. Now we have a report, I guess, from an Italian documentary filmmaker, but officially there's no report.
But I also would say, too, that there's something going on here. And I feel like that you got to the heart of it when you talked about, I went and found the part about the C-130 crew and the helicopter crew. And it's like some of the details are correct in the sense that they're basically in Italian, translated by Google Translate, trying to explain how a cargo net works for sling loading on a helicopter. And the fact that this is true also that a Chinook is probably the only aircraft, depending on where they were. I mean, Kandahar is not super high elevation, but depending on where they were, if they were in the mountains, that Chinooks are probably the only helicopters that could likely fly up to where they were, because that was an experience that I had in Afghanistan too, that like in certain areas you could have Kiowas or Apaches or Blackhawks, but when it came to getting over the passes, the only aircraft that could really do it in certain conditions were Chinooks. So that makes sense. And then obviously the C-130, they said it was covered. We sort of knew what we were doing, but it was a secret mission, etc. But then I'm going to read 2 paragraphs here that I feel like can give you some indication as to who might glom onto this story. So, as fantastic as the story may sound, this testimony matches with the one Quayle had presented a few years back. Marzulli asked Mr. D, the former special ops soldier who had heard about the Giant of Kandahar when he was in Afghanistan, whether he believes that the American people, and the people in general, have a right to know if there are beings other than humans being on Earth. Correction. Human beings other than humans living on Earth. Mr. D replies without hesitation. My idea is that if things go exactly as the Bible says, they don't want it. If things go against Darwin's evolution, they can't be spoken out. So, what we're basically getting at is that in order to kind of in a roundabout way argue that a kind of biblical creationism is in fact being suppressed because it's true, you have to believe that the troops did battle with a biblical giant.
Well, it's either that or something. You know, he does mention the Darwin aspect of it, but this is like people looking for Sasquatch or looking for Bigfoot or looking for the Yeti or whatever big hairy man ape that you want to believe is out there. There's a whole lot of people who believe. There's a whole lot of really shaky evidence, and people just really want to grab onto it. And it's always that there's some reason why the government doesn't want you to know. If the government, look, do you think that like in a world where like we're currently the National Park Service is doing Fat Bear Week, where all the bears are getting real fucking fat before they go hibernate, do you think that like we wouldn't be exploiting a goddamn Sasquatch in some way or another, whether it be for tourism attractions or whether it be in some sort of labor form? Like, look, the reason I know that Sasquatch doesn't exist is because capitalism hasn't rooted it out and fucking made it sad and terrible yet. So, or maybe they're just that good. I like to hope. As I said, I cannot say yes or no. I can only say there are no official reports. But I would love to believe somewhere out there is another Kandahar giant, or perhaps a Nangarhar giant, or maybe a Herat giant. I hope that in the caves of Afghanistan somewhere else, there's just an entire race of giants. And this one guy, they just caught him on a bad day. He's being territorial, and they had to shoot him in the face for 30 seconds. It does say in here, like, they're sad that there wasn't a more peaceful outcome. But, like, you guys rolled up on somebody else's home turf. You got Castle Laud, all right? So once again, the United States World Police Force doing no-knock raids and getting killed.
Violating the Third Amendment. I hate this shit. You know what?
Right.
You weren't allowed to go into the goddamn Kandahar Giant's cave. That's against the law, all right? Everyone knows a man's home is his castle, especially if he lives in there eating bones, okay? And why did you have to disturb him? Like, nobody in Kandahar is apparently having a problem. Nobody, yeah. They say they found human remains, but like, well, okay, give me the names. Give me the name of the Special Forces guy who died. Give me the names of the people in and around the villages who got eaten by the goddamn giant. Like, nobody can, because that's the thing. If it exists, clearly it wasn't bothering anyone. So you guys had to go in and fucking murder this thing and get your buddies stabbed by a spear, a huge spear that also apparently exists in Native American reservations in Illinois, because you couldn't leave it alone. You just need to have a little bit more fucking self-discipline. I do think, though, military crypto-zoology is an interesting take, because there is so much about like the unexplainable and the weird and the kind of spooky when you're in these environments, when you're in places where you're far from home and you're isolated and, like people live there, but the people who live there aren't particularly cosmopolitan. Like they're more often than not very poor, and like they grew up in these valleys and villages and stuff, and their experience, the world they live in, is very confined to like that area, and so to you it feels like terra incognita. You know what I mean? Like, people have been there since the dawn of human fucking civilization, but to an American, random Joe, when you're standing on some hilltop in Afghanistan, you ask yourself, like, oh, I wonder if any human beings have been here in 2,000 years. Like, yes, they fucking have. They were probably there last week fucking driving motorcycles and herding sheep, but it doesn't matter. Like, it feels that way. And so there's this sensation of sort of being in unexplored territory. And that, I think, also, like, you're tired. It gets late. You're doing shit. You're going without sleep. You're hungry. You're scared maybe. You start seeing shit. Like I could tell you, I saw some weird goddamn visions in Ranger School because I was so hungry and so tired. And they weren't
you'll
cryptozoology.
go on a vision quest real easy that way.
I watched a guy basically be like, guys, why are we not walking on the trail? I found the trail, and just drop his rifle and just run off into the woods. Like that wasn't me, thank God. But I remember watching that guy just like free, like he was okay, but he was just fucking exhausted. He was just beyond sleep. But me personally, one night I was pulling security, and I was looking down my nods pulling security. And in Ranger School, sometimes you'll just pull security for fucking hours. You know what I mean? And it's so hard because when you're on the objective, or when you're like setting up on the objective, or you're in the like either back in the ORP, or you're in an en route rally point on the way to your, just to go establish your patrol base for the overnight. You might still be in helmets, so not patrol caps, but helmets. Because typically in Ranger School, you don't put your helmets on until you're like at the ORP. So you're wearing a fucking helmet, and your flick and all your gear, and you're staring down your optic through your nods. Oh yeah, I'm an idiot. You have to be wearing your fucking helmet at night because that's how you mount your nods. I'm really stupid. It's been a long time. And so you've got this heavy ass weight on your head, and you're staring down your rifle with your nods, like in the prone position, trying to not fall asleep. And it's the easiest thing in the world to just like rest your nods on like the carrying handle of your rifle, or like on the top Picatinny rail, and just fucking nod off. So you're in this endless fight to stay awake, and you're back and forth, just like trying to fucking not fail, trying to not suck, but also just being like, I'm on Planet X right now. And I'm telling you, man, one night in this delirious, hungry fucking haze, staring through my nods, I started looking at the foliage on the trees, which you can see through the, the green light and the nods. And I swear to you, man, I started to see like scowling old man faces who all basically in my mind knew of like my failure and my just complete inability to like be a soldier, like how fucking pathetic I was. And they were just scowling in disappointment and laughing at me. And I was just like, I wanted to cry. I'm like, I don't want to be this much of a fuck up. What can I do? Like, how do you know all my secrets?
I don't mean to laugh because but that is like that's very much what would happen to me too. Like my vision quest that I would accidentally go on in Ranger School would certainly be somebody just being like very disappointed in me, like just up to. But I was raised Catholic, so I don't know what your excuse is.
Episcopalian and Jewish, so I mean, I got some Catholic light plus extreme different kind of guilt.
Right.
Well, the thing you got to realize though is that I think that like because there's this an extent to which it's hard to like fact check or common sense check these things, especially when the discussion goes out from the world of military stuff into like military civilian, because I think that civilians in general are obviously going to be very hesitant to be like, well, no, that's bullshit, when the guy they're talking to has verifiably been to Afghanistan, for example, and they haven't. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
How
do you know you weren't there, bitch?
Exactly. You weren't there. I was. Well, it's like, yeah, but I don't doubt that you went to Afghanistan. I don't doubt that Afghanistan exists. I just don't know if, like, you saw an enormous flaming chariot riding across the sky, waging destruction upon the land. I don't know if you fucked a fish that was also a human. Like, there's so much that kind of lends itself to that kind of secrecy. Like the government wants to hide it, and the military knows, and some troops know, but they've been silenced, and all these kinds of things. And I think it just feeds into this sort of conspiracy theory in a way that, well, other conspiracy theories we're seeing on the internet are, propagating. Something else I would say too, though, just as an aside, and I'll hand it back over to you, is that in a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of, well, for lack of a better word, sort of Bergdahl storyism, which obviously I know very intimately, that there's a lot of truth to the story, but because there wasn't really like any kind of official explanation beyond a very simplistic and kind of, opaque one, it created this ground for people's imaginations to flourish. And I feel like this stuff happens a lot. And obviously, like, you know better than I do as a public affairs guy, what's the line to strike between like indulging every stupid conspiracy versus just completely wholesale denying it. But to me, like, when you start to fact check this stuff, it starts to make me laugh. And I mean, like, one time when I was in a seminar, one of our instructors in the career course was like, do you believe in ghosts and why? That was just like the discussion of the day. And I said no, but I do think that there are times when it feels like when you're in a space that has been like witness to some historic event, whether you know it or not, you kind of feel different. And so I wonder like if there's some kind of imprint, but I don't necessarily think there are ghosts. Whereas one of my classmates was like, I was literally running by myself down a trail on Fort Riley one time, or Fort Leavenworth, I think he's like, which everyone says is like the most haunted military base. And he's like, I was running at Leavenworth on one of the back trails, and out of nowhere, I saw basically a native guy on horseback in full battle regalia coming at me. And I was like, are you fucking... And then he's like, and I looked around to see if there was anyone around. I looked back and he was gone. Now, was that guy making it up? Maybe. I don't know. But obviously, like, he didn't strike me as he was being a faker. You know what I mean? He didn't strike me like it was like a fun story. So maybe people have seen things. Maybe they do believe it. I don't know. That being said, military ghost stories is a weird fucking one, but I got to be honest with you, man. I feel as though in 2002, with just how prolific technology was, even then with digital cameras and to some extent even video, I just don't think that there would not have been some photographic evidence of an 1,100-pound redheaded biblical giant who was 13 feet tall who got shot in the face for 30 seconds.
I just like the idea that this all could have been solved if somebody had eaten the pound cake out of their MRE. Like, like an entire, just some guys like wakes up and like, you know, just doesn't really have any recollection of the last couple of days because they've been on mission for so long and they've been so hungry, and they're just like, what happened to Johnson? And like Johnson just like got transferred to another unit, but they just like, no man, he got stabbed by a giant in a cave in Kandahar. Like that's why he's back at Ramstein, living it up. It's just like, no man, no, we got attacked. Don't you remember we shot that thing for 30 seconds in the face before it died? So hey, maybe troops, pack a snack with you, and you won't see giant cryptids that murder the shit out of your friends. But
it would be even funnier if this was just like one of their buddies went AWOL, and to cover for him, they invented this whole story, and they never thought that like 5 different Italians would waste 100,000 man hours trying to investigate it 20 years later.
I mean, there's still going to be a body to recover, though. If they really wanted to do that, they should have been like, the giant stabbed our buddy and then ate him very quickly, and that's why there's nothing to recover here. I don't know what to tell you, sir. We just were attacked by a giant.
Sir, it was a goddamn giant. No shit, there I was. A fucking huge redheaded giant ate my friend. It's no longer with us. R.I.P. Press F.
So, Kandahar giants. Hey, let's. This is something new. This is something different than the Sasquatch. This is something that I believe that I can now get into and be weird about as I grow older into my middle age, as my waistband expands. Rather than go to Sasquatch get-togethers, which are big. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of Sasquatch meetings and camping trips and everything. But I think it's about time for us to start up a Kandahar Giants to go find more, because there's got to be more, right? There has to be more than just one. We found one in Michigan. But although bones, the whole giant bones things is prevalent not just in the military, but in America in general. You can find, if you Google search giant bones, you'll find like, oh, look at these soldiers with this giant skull that they found, like straight out of fucking King Kong Skull Island. It's like obviously a Photoshop, but hey, what's the harm in believing that there's also giants walk among us? It makes for good movies. Now, I want to see this turned into a feature film. I think that we can get Tom Hanks. Maybe we get Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg could be the Boston Major, who is like leading things.
He's the special operator whose nickname is Fenway.
Right. Yes.
Hey, yes, Fenway, get that fucking giant. That's the Bronx guy who's in there for some reason.
and just like yell slurs at the Giants and everything. We'll get some up and comers to play the privates. Yeah. Oh, we'll get. I'll tell you what. I don't know if they're old enough yet to be down and out privates, but we can get the cast of Stranger Things. Like they're already good with paranormal stuff. We'll put all of those weirdo kids into some battle uniforms. They got to be like 17 now, right? That's old
Yeah,
enough.
thereabouts. Yeah, they'll get. I was gonna say you could have Orlando Bloom be the private who gets fucking speared because he can just reprise his role in Black Hawk Down. But then I also realized like he's way older than you and me, so he probably doesn't have that sort of like cherubic private look anymore.
No, we gotta find new ones. So the first squad of soldiers that gets shellacked will be the Stranger Things kids because we gotta have them be young and stupid and die. And then we'll bring in our operators. We'll have Major Fenway, who's leading it, Mark Wahlberg, just scowling at everybody, and we'll bring in some other people.
Hey guys, there's a
we'll,
fucking giant in Kandahar.
we'll get Carrie Shocks to come on and do that.
I mean, realistically speaking, depending on how far we want to go with exploring the new field of military cryptozoology, I feel as though like there is no reason why we couldn't literally just table read a screenplay about the Giant of Kandahar. I mean, quite frankly, because every military movie now at this point is so fucking formulaic that it's like, it's basically, there's a spooky ood, there's a world music woman singing in a language you don't understand, Mark Wahlberg is there, Arabs are scary, you know, it's the same shit. I've seen so many of these fucking movies and it's just the same thing over and over again. So I feel like this could at least be a change. This is something new, you know, like we can explore our own moral culpability with the U.S. occupation of Afghanistan by interpreting it through a fight between a biblical giant and a bunch of plucky special operators.
And see, this is the war movie that I want to see. You know, like when we think about the Gulf War, the movie that I watched for that is Three Kings.
Three Kings, yeah, hell yeah.
For the current wars, though, like what are we gonna, we just have a bunch of depressing shit, and we have stuff where it's like we're trying to be funny, but it's not. It's like, why don't you just make something based around some shit that did not actually happen, but some people say it happened, and just fucking run with it?
Well, I mean, that's Apocalypse Now, isn't it? It's like, oh, well, we're gonna take Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, but make it about Vietnam, and then like it's gonna go completely off the fucking rails, but it's gonna be like weirdly evocative in a way. I mean, that's kind of a Midnight Clear, isn't it? I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with that, but here's just like a bunch of genius nerd soldiers in their nerd unit basically hole up in this fucking, this French castle or chateau in a snowstorm during the Battle of the Bulge, and then wind up having to commit acts of atrocity because war touches us all. It's like, in a way, it's not that. It's a weird sort of interpretive, expanded metaphor, if you will. But like, this is at least funny.
Yeah, I gotta hand it to him. This is some good stuff, and this is ripe for. Cause what do we got? Godzilla. The Godzilla movies are fine, but they've been lacking. The King Kong movie was good, but it's time to really like knuckle into like, let's revisit war movies, but with the cryptozoology side of it.
Did you ever hear any cryptozoology stories or like monster stories in Iraq? I mean, obviously, like there's this isn't zoology, but the sort of the famous like the Chechen sniper. That every sniper who could actually kill people was a Chechen sniper, or it was Juba, the Baghdad sniper. It was always one person. When it was just sort of like a method of explaining that snipers were actually able to kill soldiers, when in fact it was probably just lots of different people with lots of different guns who just happened to have good shots at the moment. But the Chechen sniper or so on. Like, I'm just wondering, like, were there any sort of like, what the British call folk devils, like weird
folk devils
phenomenon?
No, the only thing that I know about in Iraq was their crest, their symbol, which is a mythological, like the face of an Iraqi king, the body of a lion, and the wings of a falcon or something. And there's a whole story behind that, but that's actual mythology. That's not, people saying like, yeah, I saw it. I just did
the lion with the face of Nebuchadnezzar just ate the shit out of my fucking patrol.
There is, let's see, there's the Starush, a dragon-like animal depicted on the Ishtar Gate of Babylon in present-day Iraq, but it doesn't seem like they have anything. And I'm interested to go into the like I want somebody like fuck. I want somebody to really spend some money and time on this because like all we have about this Giant of Kandahar are American soldier stories. You would think that people living in the Kandahar region would have come across this. So like, are there stories of people who are like, yeah, you guys saw that redheaded giant? Yeah, he fucked you up, didn't he? Yeah, he ate my brother 3 days ago. So maybe stay away from him.
Yeah, you'd think, right? But that's the thing. Italians could go interview people in Afghanistan, but instead their drivers just conveniently have to also be special operators who corroborate the story. So it's always the same with these damn zoology stories, man. I just want hard fact. I want the absolute truthful, flinty reporting, and it's a shame. But Francis, I feel like we've gone on about this, and so we do also have a bonus this week we want to preview.
Which bonus did we
Dad
we
chat.
put out? Dad chat. I mean, it's dad chat. What more can you want other than two dads chatting about? Do you like the first 5 minutes of every episode? Do you wish that it was an hour long?
You
Guess
can get
what?
it. But we do have a lot of things we talk about. I explained how the British housing market is terminally fucked. We talk about regionalisms in different states. We talk about how small states are, like, in your opinion, basically yappy little dogs who won't shut up. We do a lot. We cover a lot of ground. So I feel like we're going to roll some footage. And if this is interesting to you, just bear in mind that this and every other dad chat is available at the $1 a month tier on Patreon.
Yep, it's cheap content, so it's cheap for you, baby.
Oh, dude, I can't even begin to describe it. Like, there's things about Bedford I like. Like, Cynthia and I work out in this gym, and the people are so fucking nice. Like, they're the nicest, super nicest people. Like, you talk to them, like, via email. Like, they'll just, like, square you away. Like, they're super, super friendly and kind and everything. Like, they didn't normally offer temporary memberships, but they just made an exception for us because we're like, hey, we're going to be here, but we're going to go to the gym every day. Like, and they're like, yeah, absolutely. Like, here's what we would charge you, and they're super cool with it. You go into the gym and there's like a fucking photoshopped thing of like a dude yoked but like fucking praying, and it said like, how wrong would it be to be strong for the world but not for him, because it's like get jacked for Jesus. Like, it's just like how do you explain that to someone who doesn't know what a fucking tractor pull is? Like, how do you explain that to anyone who's not, you know what I mean? Like, that's, to me, that's sort of like, if I've got to rep somewhere, that's what I'm going to rep, because that's where I'm from. That's like what I know it. Like, yeah, I grew up in a bullshit suburb, but like, you drive 10 minutes from where I'm from and it was just nothing but farm fields. Like, that's where I'm from. But I look at that, I'm like, yeah, you could definitely buy a house there, and be okay. But then you live in this community that's just, I don't know, fucking devastated, man.
But
like, the bonds are strong, but it's like the only jobs are like Walmart, AutoZone, and one of the one fucking quarries that hasn't closed down yet.
It just makes me think about, like,
or be a cop.
There's plenty of places in, like, regular urban areas that are completely devastated. Like,
yeah,
come to St. Louis and go up to the north side, and you will see like just an utterly obliterated area. Just and that is, I love rural areas, but also I don't live in them, and I think that I have a romanticized vision of it, but also I just love the people. Like, my wife and I years ago went to Carthage, Missouri, because Carthage is where the Precious Moments Chapel is. And that is a fucking trip. And if you're in the area, you should definitely go see it and experience that insanity. But they had one of the places we stopped at to eat was a steak place that was connected to an indoor rodeo, because we're down in northwest or southwestern Missouri, which is really close to Oklahoma. So Missouri, like, if you break it off into different pieces, like the Mississippian area, which is like where I live, that could be easily integrated into Illinois. Northern Missouri is all farmland. Southern Missouri is all Ozark. This little pocket down here in the bottom is ranching Missouri, which I'd never been to in my life. Like, I had no idea it existed. So we go down there and like we're eating, a mediocre steak and fries, and watching like 6-year-olds learn how to hog tie baby goats. And it's just like, it's such a, like, every time I think about, when discussing politics online and talking about the the coastal elites versus the people in the middle states and everything. And it's like, man, it goes even further than that. Like, I had no idea this shit existed in my own state.
Yeah.
And I've been all over my state. I love the Ozarks. I love northern Missouri. I love the glacial plains and everything. I know all about it, but like, this was just such a weird, eye-opening thing. And that's why, like, I've always not to get all like anti-constitutional on everybody, but I mean, fuck the Constitution. But also, like, America is just too fucking big, and it's too what do I have in common with somebody from fucking Arizona or New Mexico, man? Like, that's just a completely. I meet people from there, and they have like their own language. Philadelphia, all of that stuff. It's wild to meet all of these people and to be exposed to all of that. And like you said, like, how do you explain that? How do you explain like how fun it was to watch 6-year-olds learn how to do? The bigger kids got to ride a horse and lasso the goat, but the little kids, they just kind of run up and it's a little baby goat and they knock it over. They pick it up and they put it on its side and then they tie up its legs and they say, "Look, I did it." And then the baby goat just kind of shakes its legs and gets out of the thing because it's a 6-year-old tying a knot. And it's fucking adorable and it's so fun to watch. But like, I don't know. It's also
they let kids ride sheep in like little mini rodeos too. I've seen that. I saw that in New Mexico because I lived in New Mexico, for 3 years when I was a kid. It's it's weird too, man. I mean, one of the things you pointed out, talking about like those regional differences. I mean, it's funny you would mention Philadelphia because I've driven when my brother moved back to America. Cynthia and I, man, I would never do this trip again. It was such a fucking nightmare. We rented a shitty white van from a rental place on West 46th Street in Manhattan. And people who know New York know what I'm talking about. Like, you get into like the Chelsea Hell's Kitchen area and you have like these old, recently sort of refurbished old industrial shit, like kind of in the garment district. And you can rent, a bullshit van and it's not in great shape. But, you can do like a daily rate where like as long as you fill it up, they don't care about mileage. And so that's what we got. And we drove this fucking piece of shit van through the Holland Tunnel to the Jersey Turnpike, down all the way through Pennsylvania into Ohio, I believe into Ohio. Yeah, into Ohio, and then into Indiana to see my parents and load up like a bunch of old furniture they had, and then drive it all the way back and take it and put it into the place where my brother was going to be living. And going through Western Pennsylvania, man, like it's just so incredibly different. Like I've been to Philly a few times. I've been there for work and I've been there to see my friend who moved down there from DC after a while, but we know each other from high school. And I was always just blown away by, how like it takes like, I think like 6 hours or more to drive from Philly to Pittsburgh. And that's in the same state. I mean, you know what I mean? Similarly with Indiana. I mean, I remember my college girlfriend and I, her family, she was originally from Korea, but she had moved to America when she was like, she was born in America, moved to Korea back, and then moved back to America when she was like in high school. And she was going to go see her dad in Seoul. And so we were like, well, yeah, fuck it. I'll just drive you to the airport to Chicago. Cause I mean, like, it's direct flight. It's just easier and cheaper than flying, from Indianapolis to Chicago and then driving back. And so we had to get up at balls early in the morning and drive because it was such a long drive. I mean, like, even just Bloomington's not that far south in Indiana, but driving up to Chicago was, I want to say about 6 hours.
Yeah, it's about that.
And you look on the map and you're like, it can't be that far. And it's like, no, it's, and that's the thing, right? In like Southern Indiana, like I mentioned like French Lick or Evansville, like those places, those are all like full on y'all Indiana. You know what I mean? Like New Albany, Indiana, which is like basically a suburb of Louisville. Like people say y'all, people speak very Southern. Like I had a master sergeant in my ROTC program who was from New Albany, and he's like, all right, y'all really fucking batting 1,000 today, ain't y'all? Like that level of Southernism, right? But then you go up to like the Chicagoland region and, say like Portage, Indiana, or Valparaiso, Indiana, and they talk like Mike Ditka. You know what I mean? Like, I can't even do the accent, but like that, the Bears kind of shit, like they 100% talk that way. So, I mean, that's just in one state, and that state isn't even really that big. You think about just how fucking gigantic America is and how those regional differences are. And,
yep.
A person on the coast is going to be like, yeah, fuck Indiana, was a redneck ass state. And meanwhile, I'm from Indiana, but I'm from the part of Indiana that people in Indiana are like, you bougie piece of shit. How dare you fucking look down at me? You know what I mean? Like, it's
Yeah, my brother and sister, my brother's 17 years older than me, and my sister is 11 years older. And my brother grew up in Camdenton, Missouri, which is down in Ozark, Missouri, and my sister was half Camdenton, half St. Louis, and I'm full St. Louis. I was born and raised in St. Louis, and it wasn't until like I mentioned something, I can't remember who, as either my wife or my friend Roy, but both of them were there and talking about my brother's Southern Missouri accent, and I was like, he doesn't have an accent. Like, he absolutely has an accent. You don't hear it because that's just what the way your brother sounds, and you're not from Southern Missouri. Like, but he sounds, and like now that I listen to it, he does. He sound like if you put the two of us together, we don't talk the same.
That's funny.
Like, yeah, and like there are just slight inflections that we have that are different. That we both picked up from just where we grew up. And yeah, that's Southern Missouri is a 3-hour drive from here, but it's Ozark, Missouri, so it's like it's very much like kind of cut off. If you ever spent time down at Leonard Wood, that's the area that I'm talking about.
Yeah, I've driven through there before. Yeah, well, I was thinking about this too because like my brother and I, right, we talk very similarly. Our intonation is similar. Like when we get excited about things, like the way that we talk and emphasize stuff is 100% the same. So like when we speak English, but bear in mind that like my brother and I lived in Germany when we were kids, and for a period of time, we spoke German more than English because I went to kindergarten through second grade in Germany at a German school, and Chris went to third grade through fifth grade in Germany. And fifth grade is actually the start of high school in Germany. Like you weren't in the same school as the big kids, like the same part of the school, but you take the basically like social sorting exam when you're 10, and then that determines what kind of school you'll go to. And so he was in the school that was in like sort of the university track. So he was actually doing like he like imagine starting middle school really early. That's basically what it was like for him. So fifth grade, sixth grade, seventh grade, eighth grade is in like the lower gymnasium or Realschule or Hochschule or whatever. And then upper is all, and they also, if I remember correctly, they have a 13th grade in Germany. Like you take your exams, your university exams when you're 19. So we lived in Baden-Württemberg, which if you know anything about Germany is in the southwest part of the country. And it's like, friends of the show, the Corner Spady podcast have talked about Baden-Württemberg being the, like, the fucking dark heart of Germany. But I mean, for me, it was just sort of, we lived in this town of like 1,000 people in the middle of fucking nowhere in Germany, and everybody knew everybody, and it's very bucolic in a way. But here's the thing, Baden-Württemberg, they have a very distinct regional accent, this like Swabian German or Schwäbisch in German. I basically forgot German. I mean, I retained some of it, but not much. And then I took 1 year of it in high school, where we were taught to pronounce things in what you would call Hochdeutsch, which is like the Northern German that's now like the standard German. And then I went back in 2005 when I was studying abroad, and I spent like 10 days there, and a lot of my German came back because I had to practice it, because I hadn't spoken it for real in like fucking, in years.
Decades by then.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah, exactly. And so when my brother moved back to America, sometimes when we were just hanging out, like I would be like, do you still speak German? And like he kind of does. I mean, he speaks Japanese now. Like he speaks Japanese fluently, and so he lived in Japan for 10 years. So like he'd forgotten a lot, but he could still speak it because he spoke it at a much like more advanced level than me when we, he was doing like much more comprehensive stuff in German.
Yeah. The Bethea boys just all over the place, aren't you?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, right? When he speaks to me in German, he has a Schwäbisch accent, and I don't anymore. And so I sound really pretentious, like I'm like aggressively over enunciating everything. Like, heute sprechen wir Deutsch zusammen, like really, really enunciated.
I want to slap you.
And Chris is just like, I mean, I don't speak that exaggeratedly, but I speak in Hochdeutsch now. And Chris is like, ja, das weiß ich weiß nicht, was wir müssen tun. Ja, wir sprechen Deutsch, aber ich spreche Schwäbisch. Like he speaks like that. Like it's like he'll use these kind of like declensions that just sound weird to me because he speaks like a Swabian, and I'm just like, what the fuck? Like you sound like a German redneck. He's like, yeah, and you sound like a pretentious asshole.
All right, everybody, thank you so much. You can follow me at Army Strength, follow Nate at In These Deserts, follow the podcast at Hell of a Way. If you are not a Patreon subscriber, patreon.com/Hell of a Way to Die. All those links are down there. Enjoy the links that we're going to send for this. And Nate, yes, I did find a Pakistan crypto-zoology, a bipedal human primate cryptid allegedly inhabiting the mountainous regions of Pakistan and Afghanistan called the Barmanu, or Badmanus. Badman. I think it's
There it
probably
is, man.
it's probably just a hairy troop in Waziristan.
We're turning a goddamn new corner here on this podcast, all right? We are 100% doing zoology from now on.
It's going to be coast to coast Zulu time instead of AM. All right, everybody. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.